There we go. So yeah, I'm going to go over a couple of essays with you and just show you the format and point out some of the key things that we like to see. And then I've started marking the submitted essay outlines. So some of you will get those back. Well, you'll get them back today at some point. Some of you have already gotten them. Regan, yours is in. I just finished yours. Okay. Once you get that, you can't redo these ones. Okay, there's no redoing the essay outline because basically on there, the comments I've given you are to help you do the essay. Okay. And then when I mark the essay, we also won't be redoing essay. Okay. Like as far as reassessing things, we won't reassess the outline or the essay. But you're going to take the comments from the outline and apply it to writing a full-fledged essay. You know, intro, paragraph, body paragraphs, conclusion, all of that stuff. And that's really what today's Zoom lesson is for. Okay. I've got a lot of them. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'm going to post, I think it's 6 of them in D2L, so you can open them and read them. And the 6 are on Behind the Headlines, Invitations, Death of a Salesman, Horses of the Night, and Proof Rock. Okay, I don't have any Shawshank ones. In the last couple of years, I've taught Goodwill Hunting, and I have a couple of those, but that won't really help anybody. So, but there's a good variety, and I've posted on them whether they were an excellent or a proficient or an EPF. I'm not showing anybody any satisfactory or lower because I kind of want you guys to shoot for higher, obviously, or to see what it takes to achieve a proficient or an excellent. All right. Having said that, I'm going to go to share screen and share my screen. If I can find, there we go. So we're going to start by looking at an essay. This was written in summer school of 2016. Okay, and it's on invitations. Okay, the topic was discuss the ideas developed by the text creator in your chosen text about the nature of motivations that direct an individual's course of actions. So the key words there are the nature of the motivations. Where do those motivations come from? Not just what are the motivations, but where do they come from, which direct an individual's course of action, which kind of guide an individual in the choices they make, the things they do. Okay, and this student chose to write about invitations. The narrator was motivated by the expectations of others to attend social events, makes the climactic realization she should be motivated by personal desires. Okay, when individuals are motivated by the expectations of others, they often feel important and flattered, but late obligated to fulfill these expectancies until making the realizations that their actions should be determined by their personal desires, allowing for. This is just the student's planning. He was working through things. Okay, now what I want to talk about is, first of all, introductory paragraph. An introductory paragraph has to start really general. You don't just jump right into talking about the text. As a matter of fact, I prefer if students don't really mention the text at all in an introductory paragraph until they get to the controlling idea or thesis statement. Okay, and this is what you would have heard from me all semester long if we had been in class, but the essay is not about invitations. Okay. The students using the story invitations to write their essay, but it's not about invitations. Jamie, I'm going to pick on you. If it's not about invitations, then what's the essay about?
It's like generally how individuals like act if they were like that character in invitations.
Exactly, and we're gonna use this topic to focus on how individuals react. And so then the essay is actually about people in general and how people respond to whatever the conflict is, and we use the character of invitations as one example. Okay, and so I don't want your whole introduction to be about invitations or proof rock or death of a salesman or whatever it is you choose to write about. I want your introduction to be about people in general or about the topic. Okay, so in this essay, the student begins, and this is he was a very strong writer. This was an EPF essay. It was excellent and proficient mixed. And I don't expect everybody to do this, but I'll point it out. He uses extended metaphor throughout the essay. And so he starts by introducing that. At the core of any determined action lies motivation, a force so powerful that it can launch dreams and desires ceaselessly into reality. Okay, so this is a general opening. It's just about motivation in general. and motivation is a force so powerful it can launch dreams. So that's a very general statement, okay? But then the student begins to get more specific. Where this motivation originates from, however, is up to the cognizance of the individual. Okay, now that's more specific. Where does that motivation come from? So you start very general and you narrow down to a more specific, and then the most specific thing of all in the introductory paragraph will be the thesis statement or the controlling idea, okay? Much like embarking on a sailboat, the direction of the boat can be determined in different ways. An individual can point the sails, their chosen direction, and pursue personal desires, or the boundless storm of wind can blow the boat down a passageway of fulfilling expectations. So that's the extended metaphor, okay? The short story Invitations by Carol Shields suggests that when individuals are motivated by the expectations of others, they often feel obligated to helplessly pursue the expected actions, until discovering the realization that the priority of their actions should be motivated by personal desires. This results in freedom, clarity, and ultimately self-contentment. Okay, so that's the controlling idea, and that's where he introduces the text. One thing this student could have done better is discuss the topic a little bit more clearly before they jumped into it, right? Because they gave us what is motivation and where does motivation come from, and they jumped into their metaphor without going any further, okay? But that's what an introductory paragraph looks like, okay? I want the opening to be fairly general introduction to the topic itself, and then you get more and more specific as you go about specific aspect of the topic that you're going to focus on, and then you get to your controlling idea, okay? And your controlling idea is going to be the most specific statement of all, okay? And that's exactly what happened here. When individuals are motivated by expectations of others, they feel obligated to helplessly pursue. That's very specific. That's one argument that's very specific, okay? All right, now, do that. Every body paragraph must start with a topic sentence. And you guys have already written your topic sentences in your essay outlines, okay? If I've commented on the topic sentence at all, take the comment, fix it up, but you don't have to start over. You don't have to use a cliche, reinvent the wheel. Use the one you wrote with some modifications that were suggested, okay? And so the students' topic sentence for conflict. Individuals quite often face expectations of others, motivating them through flattery and feelings of self-importance. So the conflict here is that expectations of others. The short story Invitations finds a nameless protagonist stumbling upon a series of invitations in her mailbox. These invitations increasingly grow more glamorous, elaborate, and personal as they invite the narrator to social events. Others had expectations of the narrator to attend social events, thus leading the narrator into a state of self-importance. After being invited to a private art gallery, the narrator tried to imagine what kind of drawings she was being invited to view, and then decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had been invited. Okay, now this is important, okay? So the student gives us the context for the quote first, and I think lots of you have seen that comment from me over the course of the semester. Where's the context? You can't just slam a quote in first. So here's the context. After being invited to a private art gallery, the narrator tried to imagine. What caused her to try to imagine this? Being invited to the gallery. It's that simple, just a tiny bit of context, okay? This was the narrator's first exposure to social expectations, as she felt important for specifically being sought after to attend this art gallery. She faced expectations of others to make an appearance and felt no obligation at the time, only importance and flattery. The invitation symbolically represented expectations society holds, as the narrator felt the breeze of expectations beginning to set a direction of her boat. And so there's that metaphor the student used. The breeze of society is blowing her boat in the direction they want it to go, not the direction she wants it to go. Excitement took over the narrator's mind as she felt flattered and the effects of motivation were initiated. The narrator began contrasting her plans with the expectations of others when she believed that the art gallery would be better than spending Saturday evening in her new apartment, sitting in an armchair with a book and feeling loneliness drink her drop by drop. Okay, so again, they gave the context and then the quote. The power of expectations was emphasized as the narrator felt embarrassed of her own plans and her own desires. She began prioritizing pursuing actions that fulfilled expectations. Her sails were set to pursue expectations as motivation began determining actions. Okay, so that's the conflict. she's not in control of her own actions because she's allowing society to do that for her. Is that clear? Okay. And so again, you start with the topic sentence right up here, and then you introduce the text, and then you have to introduce the conflict very clearly. You'll notice the student never really got into her response to the conflict. It was all about conflict, okay? Individuals with expectations, despite initial flattery, often start feeling obligated to attend these social events and lose sight of their personal desires as they grow consumed with confusion about conflicting motives. The narrator started neglecting her personal desires of reading an adventitiously acquired copy of Mansfield Park and was consumed with pleasing social expectations, whether she wanted to or not. That's her response, the initial response. She starts to feel like I have to do it, and she ignores what she wants to do. She lost sight of being motivated through personal desires when she started thinking of the judgment of others. The narrator doubtfully thought how much better it would be to be going out, how much easier it would be to say, should anyone ask. The narrator lost freedom of pursuing her own desires, and her actions were solely determined by social expectations. She felt obligated to go out, not because she wanted to, but she doubted her personal desires and was afraid of the judgment she might face for pursuing them. So here's what I want to point out is what the student is doing is they're giving us a claim. Okay, the claim, for example, here, the narrator started neglecting her personal desires. Then they gave us the evidence. So a statement about the character, then the evidence. Then they explain the evidence. They give a little bit of the context of the evidence, and then they explain how the evidence relates to their topic sentence. Okay. Before the end of this lesson today, I'm going to teach you those 4 steps. And it's a method I learned from my friend who teaches at St. Francis, but it's called SEX. Statement, evidence, explain, explain. Okay. Mrs. Moreau and Mrs. Solovey teach it as peak, point, evidence, explain, and connect. It's the same thing. Okay. And so you want to make your statement, then you want to provide evidence. You want to explain the evidence, and then you want to explain how the evidence relates to the topic. Okay. And you're going to do that for each piece of evidence that you give me. Okay. So you're probably going to do that 3 or 4 times a paragraph. And you'll notice like his paragraph is rather lengthy because he keeps doing that same pattern. Okay. And if you're writing that down, don't worry, at the end, I will go over it with you as well. Continuing on, the narrator made excuses on why not to pursue her own desires of reading and was becoming entirely motivated to take part in actions which would please others rather than herself. Individuals often lose freedom of pursuing their desired actions when motivated by social expectations. As the invitations of expectations grew seemingly more elaborate, the narrator's motivation for actions increased, but not through desire, through obligation. This is established in the repeating motif of clothing as the narrator unwaveringly planned to wear a certain printed velvet skirt she had and with it a black turtleneck sweater. However, as the expectations of others multiplied, the narrator started doubting her clothing as if she was thinking of excuses on why not to make an appearance. Her green silk with perhaps a double strand of pearls would be festive enough, but at the same time subdued and formal. The narrator quickly began to doubt her clothing choices and felt the need to dress more fabulously. So again, he's given us, in this case, context and 2 pieces of evidence about the clothing, and then explaining how that evidence relates to the topic. She felt the need to dress more fabulously, as she felt obligated to complete actions when motivated by expectations, not by personal desire. Individuals lose freedom and experience unwilling obligation to complete actions when motivated by expectations. It was as if their boat of action was being forced in the wrong direction by the inevitable force of wind. They helplessly lost control and pursued actions they did not want when motivated by expectations. Okay, so then we come to the secondary response. Okay, your 3rd body paragraph, if you're writing a 2-response character, secondary response. Through experiencing confusion and unwilling obligation, individuals often must reevaluate their motives so that they can pursue actions fulfilling personal desires. If you look at this topic sentence, this is really well done because we have to explain how the character gets from the initial response to the secondary. We can't just say, and then one day they decide to do something different. Okay, so what caused the narrator, or sorry, the main character in Invitations to suddenly decide to stay home? She was confused She realized she was doing something against her will. She reevaluated why she was doing it, and then she made the right choice. Okay? So your topic sentence here really needs to make that link between the initial and the secondary response. At the height of the narrator's exhilaration from invitations, she made a shocking realization that these actions were not what she truly wanted. The invitations grew more personal, which drove the epiphany that her personally desired actions were being forsaken. The narrator discovered she was not trembling with excitement, but with fear. This sudden shift displays that her previous motivations were accounting for actions that pleased others, not herself. The narrator had an epiphanical recognition. Epiphanical is not a word. The student's trying to dazzle us with fancy diction. Okay, you don't have to do that. And as a matter of fact, that brought the student's matters of choice down to proficient from excellent because he was too awkward. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. You don't have to be this fancy. Be clear and direct. Okay. He had an epiphany that when being motivated by expectations rather than personal desires, the pursued actions allowed for confusion and discontentment. Her boat had been misled. Her boat had been misled, and the actions she planned on pursuing did not reflect her aspirations. Individuals often feel cheated and confused when they disregard their desires in order to please others. The narrator's motives lead to self-displeasing actions as she spiraled into misperception. She believed that something or someone was conspiring to consume a portion of her life, of herself. This powerful quote captures the realization that individuals often make, that when being motivated by others and not truly themselves, they are abandoning their freedom and falling victim to an entrapped cohesive society. When individuals are motivated by expectations of others, they feel the need to pursue actions that please others, losing themselves in the process. It's imperative for contentment to adapt motives so that personal desires are prioritized. Okay? So this student goes does a little too much here with that, okay? He could have summed this up a little bit more clearly in one sentence, okay? But he's leading us to, what's the next paragraph going to be? Significance, okay? Once the narrator or character has made that realization, we go to significance. To sincerely taste the golden flavor of freedom, again, a little bit too much overwriting there, and serenity, motivations must reflect personal desires, translating into actions that respect an individual's freedom and contentment rather than that of others. There's your final topic sentence, okay? In order to achieve freedom and serenity, motivations must reflect personal desire. That's the significance at the end of the story. She achieves that feeling of freedom, and she realizes that what she wants to do is most important. The narrator reevaluated her motivations to reflect personal aspirations and pursued actions most beneficial for herself. After the narrator changed her motivations, she stayed home to read, and her environment was made of a pale ivory yellow material, and the light shone through it had the warm quality of very old gold. Pathetic fallacy was brilliantly used as the room was described with beautiful colors and peaceful descriptions. This reflected serenity, freedom, and contentment the narrator faced when having motives reflecting personal desires, and then acting on her personal aspirations. The narrator's ultimate contentment was established in the environment. When her motives reflected personal desires, individuals who are motivated by their own aspirations experience freedom and bliss when they pursue actions reflecting their true goals. The narrator's motivations and connected actions were juxtaposed by others who were motivated by expectations and attended social events to please others. They completed actions that did not benefit themselves, but only others, stripping them of freedom and satisfaction. These people felt resentment too at the cold rain and the buffeting wind and the price of taxis and the hostility of their hosts. These people who had motivations to please others completed actions to please others and felt resentment and despondency. Great word there. The actions pursued reflected their motivations exactly. However, their motivations did not benefit themselves at all. When individuals have motivations that do not benefit themselves, their actions will do the same thing, leaving them disheartened. Okay, now this is a very interesting paragraph. What the student did was halfway through, he abandoned the narrator and he started talking about everyone else, exactly like the story. And so he managed to show us how we can achieve freedom and serenity and peace, and how if we don't do the same thing, we will feel resentment and despondency. Then we move to the conclusion. Conclusion is probably my least favorite thing to write in an essay, because basically you're concluding it. So you want to start with a paraphrase of your thesis statement. You start very specific, and then you generally work your way back out to the general, okay? If your conclusions are not the strongest on your essays, I will probably not be too hard on you, okay? Just try to do that format where you start with your thesis statement and then you work your way through your main points, okay? When individuals are motivated by the expectations of others, they often feel obligated to pursue actions which fulfill these expectancies until making the realization that their actions should be determined by personal desires. This establishes freedom, clarity, and ultimately contentment. Actions reflect motivations almost entirely, and to truly find contentment, motivations should be prioritized to benefit oneself. And so basically what's the student doing? They're starting with their thesis, and then they're basically summing up each of the topic sentences of their main body paragraphs. When the direction of the boat is steered by either personal desires or the winds of expectations, the pathway of the boat is determined by motivations and will unavoidably travel that way. Motivations reflect actions entirely, and to achieve freedom and contentment, the motivations must incorporate personal desires. Okay. Oh, that one's a mouthful. Okay. Like I said, this one was an EPF. It was excellent for thought and understanding. It was excellent for support. It was excellent for form and structure. It was proficient in the last two categories, because he does get a little bit too wordy, and in time, sometimes it's hard to figure out what he's trying to say because of that. But the first three categories, this is a great example, a great template of an essay, okay? Everything goes chronologically. I do not expect everyone to be writing with a metaphor. That's something that, you know, a really strong, confident writer can try, like this student was. But what I want you to take away from this is that the main idea is carried clearly throughout the entire essay, okay? Just give me a minute, stopping that one. My cat's paying a visit. George. Now I'm going to share, I think I'll share one more with you. Just go over one more. I'm not going to read all 6 of them, okay? And so the next one that I'm going to share with you is on behind the headlines. Unless anybody here would like to see either Death of a Salesman or a Proof Rock. If you want to see one of those instead, just speak up now. It's fine by me. Anyone? No? Okay. So I'll go to behind the headlines. Share. And this one also came from Summer School 2016. It was the second essay. The topic was discuss the ideas developed by the text creator in your chosen text about the interplay between time and opportunity when an individual seeks to create a meaningful life. That is what I would call a big mouthful of word salad, okay? But if we really look, interplay means the interaction between. What's the interaction between time and opportunity when somebody wants to make their life meaningful? Okay, and if you look at that topic, that's not your topic clearly, but that would have worked perfectly for Shawshank. It works perfectly for Behind the Headlines. It works perfectly for Death of a Salesman. Okay, not quite as easy to use invitations for this topic, but it can be done. Okay, perfect for Proof Rock. He's got time and he's got the opportunity, but what does he do with it? Okay, we're going to be focusing on Behind the Headlines. I'm going to skip the planning. Okay, the essay was entitled Quick Decisions. In modern society, people are often faced with the pressures of making quick decisions in order to take advantage of the opportunities they are presented. Again, a very general opening statement, right? Those opportunities have an expiration date, and so quick decisions that are often poorly thought out are made, which leaves that person in an unsatisfied state. That gets a little bit more specific. Opportunities they don't last, so sometimes people jump at them without thinking it through. That's a little more specific. They're trapped in a position in which they have made a commitment to make a meaningful life for themselves, but the situation's circumstances do not reflect what they desire out of life. The pressures of time made it difficult for the person to make a choice that reflected their desires because societal expectations are set so that people are expected to make use of their opportunities. Oh, that's so much better. Often, when an individual is presented with opportunities in life in which they have a limited amount of time to respond to, they initially choose to commit to that initial opportunity in their attempt to create a meaningful life for themselves. When the individual has the realization that their choice was not reflective of their personal desires, this leaves them with feelings of they often change their course of action and choose to pursue their own desires. This leaves them with feelings of satisfaction and self-fulfillment, as they know that their new choice will create meaningful life that they can truly appreciate. That is a very large controlling idea. If this was somebody's that like one of yours that you'd submitted, I would say try and simplify this and shorten it just a little, but it's all there, okay? And it is a good idea. So then we move to the body. Paragraph 1 is going to be conflict. Many times when individuals take advantage of opportunities under the pressure of time, they fail to realize that their decision was not reflective of their desires for a meaningful life. So I've committed to something that is not what I want out of life. Sounds a lot like that other topic, make a commitment or renounce a course of action, right? Okay, and that's important to point out. A lot of these topics are interchangeable in a lot of ways, okay? In the short story Behind the Headlines by Vidya Aljukar, main character Lakshmi made the choice to marry her husband Hariharan in India 12 years before the events of the story. A little bit of context, very helpful. The opportunity to move to Canada was also very enticing and likely had a role in her decision-making process. She was supposedly going to have a meaningful life in moving to Canada and becoming the very committed wife of a successful businessman, but fast-forwarding 12 years and Lakshmi was unsatisfied. Her life was described as a suitcase lying open, yawning in front of her, which paralleled the boredom she felt. Okay, I think this student actually does a better job than the last one in giving us the context. Okay, he didn't just retell the whole story, but he gave us the pertinent details to bring us to where we are when the story begins. Okay, and you can do that for Shawshank, for Proof Rock, for any of your chosen texts. Okay, give us that 2 or 3 sentences of background, who these people are. Okay, I can't tell you how many, for example, Death of a Salesman essays I've read where the first paragraph, the student does their topic sentence and then says, Biff Loman is suffering because of his father's expectations. Well, who's Biff? What are the expectations? Just give me a little bit, okay? Okay, it highlights the fact that her quick decision was not true to her personal desires for a meaningful life, and that she only made it in her attempt to have a successful life. That was not her interpretation of it. She was not even valued by her husband for her commitment, as she had as much use to him as any other appliance in the house. How could Lakshmi's life truly be meaningful under the circumstances that the person she committed to and altered her life for doesn't even see any more value in her than a kitchen stove? The only time Lakshmi felt satisfaction in her life was when she was volunteering at the Vancouver Crisis Center. And Heather, you're here, so I'm just going to point that out. So your question to me in email a few days ago was about that. The only time she felt satisfaction in her life was when she was volunteering. And you can put that in here because that's where we're at right now in the story, chronologically, right? Okay. She felt that it was a rewarding thought knowing that her presence and effort there made a difference in the lives of the people she served. Although she had not yet fully realized it, Lakshmi's personal desires for a meaningful life were to be helping others in the crisis center. The problem was that she still had her commitment to her marriage. When an individual has made a commitment to an opportunity that doesn't reflect their personal desires, often they initially choose to fulfill their obligation to that commitment. When they realize that their personal desires take priority over their prior commitments, they can change their course of action. That's actually her initial and her secondary response kind of included in one. When Lakshmi committed herself to her husband, her initial response was to faithfully and loyally do his bidding and meet his needs without fail. After 12 years of marriage, she could recite his schedule for the day, and she always knew what his plans were. She was committed to fulfilling the obligations of her marriage, even though it was unsatisfying to her. She even went to the lengths of remaining completely silent in his presence so that he could focus on the news. This showed her strong commitment to meeting her husband's expectations because she was willing to be suppressed in order to meet his needs. Theoretically, she was supposed to be making a meaningful life for herself by taking advantage of an opportunity with which she was presented and then committing to it. So bringing us back to the topic, meaningful life, and she took advantage of that opportunity. However, Lakshmi began to feel a loss of identity after she had consistently went against her own desires for the length of the marriage. She thought back to her home in India, where she could sing songs and show her identity through her cultural traditions. After accepting her opportunity to move to Canada, she had no freedom. She related to the Kuwaiti women in an article she saw who were having their identities and personal desires destroyed. This is when Lakshmi had her moment of realization. Her true personal desire to create a meaningful life for herself was to work at the Vancouver Crisis Center, where she could express her values and not be suppressed by Hariharan's expectations for her. She packed his suitcase for the last time with useless newspapers that he had always paid more attention towards than to her, and ultimately abandoned her commitment to him. Now she would be able to pursue her own desires to create a life for herself in which she could feel satisfied. Sorry, just is that where I was? Yeah, sorry. Okay, so what that student did was combine both responses into one. Major criticism, does anyone have any criticism of that long paragraph? Anyone, anything that you would say maybe wasn't perfect? I only have 3 people to talk to, but I'm gonna pick on Heather now. Heather, is there anything in that paragraph that you would say you reading it could see you could improve upon?
I mean, to be honest, no.
No? Okay, that's fine. The only criticism that I had of it, and then I brought it to Miss Solobay too to see what she said, was it seemed a lot like plot summary in a lot of ways. He did get back to the topic a lot, but I think a lot of the summary of the plot could have been edited out. Okay, but only other complaint, or not complaint, but criticism, is that sometimes the student talks too much about making a commitment and not enough about the actual topic. And a couple of people whose outlines I've marked, I've said the same thing. Focus more on the topic. Remember those topic words and connect them more to your ideas. Not that your ideas were wrong, but one of the things in thought and understanding is how closely does the student address the topic. Okay? Now we've moved to significance. When an individual has chosen to abandon a commitment that was not reflective of their personal desires and instead pursued a course of action that expresses their values, so in this sentence, he's connecting the conflict to the response. They feel satisfied and emotionally fulfilled. There's the significance. Probably could have been a little bit more clearly stated, but there it is. Lakshmi's feeling of satisfaction was immediately present after she decided to abandon her husband. She showed her changed emotions and mindset towards her husband when she found humor in the thought of the look on his face when he opened the suitcase and saw it full of useless newspapers instead of what he needed. She was turning her back on the old commitment to him because it was not a course of action that was true to who she was. When he opens the garage door, she feels affinity to it as he is able to control its actions completely. This shows her ability to reflect on her situation that she lived under for 12 years. She had no freedom, but now that she has made her choice to leave, she could feel hopeful for the future. The crisis center was where Lakshmi felt satisfied, and it ties back to her initial comment about it being a rewarding thought. And I want to point out this was well done. He ties that to the very first paragraph where she felt it was a rewarding thought knowing that her presence and effort made a difference. Okay, so that shows a good form and structure, right? Tying it back. She was going to live a life in which her efforts were directed towards fulfilling the personal desires for a meaningful life, and her final feelings of satisfaction are shown when she leaves her house keys in the mailbox. She completely abandons her old commitment, and her acceptance of her new decision is shown by the fact that she left her house keys behind. Lakshmi's final decision shows an individual who is satisfied and fulfilled to be able to pursue their personal desires to create a meaningful life. So he's really got the meaningful life part. The part of the topic that he could have worked harder on was the time and opportunity. Okay. It's important to note though, if you guys were writing for your diplomas, if a student addresses one part of the topic, Leo's just joining us now. If the student addresses one part of the topic very clearly and doesn't address the other as much, we still say that they have addressed the topic, okay? I'm not suggesting that you would only choose one part of it to focus on, but it does happen. People kind of, you're getting into the writing of it and you forget one other aspect of it. We're not going to entirely penalize you for that. And then we go to the conclusion. Same thing. Conclusion starts with that paraphrase thesis. You start specific and you work your way out to the more general. Many times in life, people make a quick and rash decision in order to take advantage of opportunities that are presented to them. Lakshmi chose to take advantage of her chance to marry Hariharan and move to Canada. Often this initial choice is not reflective of the individual's values, and they are stuck in a commitment in which they feel unsatisfied, as was the case of Lakshmi. Eventually, the individual may be able to renounce their commitment and turn their efforts towards pursuing their personal desires for a meaningful life that they can truly appreciate. Lakshmi was able to abandon her commitment to her husband and follow a course of action that was true to her personal values. She acquired the contentment and satisfaction for herself in creating a life for herself that was meaningful to her. Okay, so again, he doesn't really talk about time at all. So he left out the time aspect of the topic, but he does talk about pursuing an opportunity and creating a life that was meaningful to her. This student received a proficient on thought and understanding, not excellent, because there were those discrepancies about topic. Okay, got an excellent for their supporting evidence. I think it was a PFE on form and structure. Matters of choice was proficient. Matters of correctness was excellent. Okay, so kind of a mix of E and PF all the way across. Okay, so those two essays are good to show you the format. I will be posting these two, plus, like I said, the other ones that I have 2 essays actually on proof rock. Okay, one on horses of the night, 2 on death of a salesman. So I'll post them all, and you guys can open those and read them. Even if not, none of the essays I post are on the text that you're going to write about. I think, Regan, you're doing Shawshank. Yeah, okay, so none of them are on Shawshank, but that doesn't matter. You read them to look at the structure, the format, to kind of get a feel for how to put it together, okay? The key points I want you to take away from it are, I want you to make sure that you have that clear introduction. The introduction talks about the topic, not so much about the text. You only introduce the text in the controlling idea or thesis. That each body paragraph has a clear topic sentence that moves us to the next part of your trying to prove the thesis, and that your conclusion starts with that paraphrase of the thesis and works its way through the essay. Okay, I'm going to stop this share. Just got to open a document. Leo, so you joined us a little bit late, but I am recording it, so I'll post it on D2L and you can watch the first part. Basically, I just read through 2 essays and talked about kind of the structure, the format of them. Now, gotta do another share. I'm gonna share with you right now this document as I type it. How to incorporate evidence. And this is what I was talking about. The pattern that I teach is, and that stands for statement. That's you make a statement about the character. I will save this file and post it in D2L as well, okay? Then you have evidence. What is wrong with me? Evidence to prove the statement, and that's direct evidence taken straight from the text. Now I want to talk about evidence. Evidence means quotes. Evidence also means, if you're good at it, a good paraphrase of a major scene, okay? So you wanted to talk about the entire scene where Biff comes upon Willie with the woman in Death of a Salesman. There's a lot of stuff in that scene. Summarize it with specific details that you mentioned that show you really know the scene well, but you don't have to give me 25 quotes from the scene to prove it, okay? That's still evidence. It's not evidence to say Biff catches his father in a hotel room with the woman. Okay, that's just a statement. Then prove to me that you know that by giving the specific details about the scene, okay? Now, the next X, this is sort of cheating and students hate me for it, but it's explain. Explain the evidence, the context and the meaning, okay? And then the next X, this one's cheating too. Explain how the evidence connects to the topic sentence, okay? Now this can be done in a number of ways. You could make one statement about the character and have two different pieces of evidence that prove it. Introducing the context, like I pointed out earlier in this lesson, sometimes you introduce the context before the evidence, okay? But you're still doing that explaining part of it, okay? How does the evidence connect to the topic sentence? Well, you want to try and make sure that you're really proving whatever part of the thesis you're proving. And when you prove the topic sentence by connecting evidence to it, you're also helping to prove your thesis statement as well, okay? And like I said, Mrs. Moreau and Mrs. Solobay teach PEAK, which is point, evidence, explain, connect, but it's actually the same things. You make your point, you find your evidence, you explain your evidence, and you connect it to the topic sentence. Why do I teach it this way? Because I think the word sex sticks in people's minds a little bit more. It seems to work for me, okay? Statement, evidence, explain, explain. My joke is always that when you spell it with two X's, it looks like a fancy strip club name. Sorry, Jamie. Okay, and that is how to incorporate evidence. Make your statement, find that evidence, explain the evidence, give me the context for it, and explain how it connects to the topic. Okay, so I will save this file as well and post it in D2L so you can open it up. That's that. Any questions from anybody? No? So please do open the other essays that I post and read through them. Okay, and just, you know, you get an idea. There's some different ones, though. The Death of a Salesman one is from Alberta Ed, and so the format is a little different because every school and every teacher teaches things slightly different, but it's still got all the major components. Okay, and just remember, when you feel comfortable, ready to write your essay, open the essay on D2L, but you cannot, once you've opened it, you have to finish it. So make sure you've got your books all in front of you, which is helpful. Have your books, your notebooks, whatever you need in front of you, have water, whatever, okay? And you get 3 hours, okay? That should be more than enough because you also have your outlines, which you will have handed back to you by the end of this day. And then that's it, okay? And when you're done your essay, that's it for the semester, okay? Unless you still have some assignments you want to give me, or you know, the Death of a Salesman quiz is still on D2L for some of you. Okay, but once you're done your essay, you are finished for the semester. Okay, awesome. All right, I'm going to stop recording.